So far. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We are going to be talking about financial aid and paying for college. And this year, especially for the class of 2024, but also if you have current students in college who will need to do the FAFSA as well. There's going to be big changes this year. The biggest one being the release is not going to be until sometime in December. And thankfully, Jerry Sabrinsky, our speaker from Lake Forest, he's the vice president of financial aid over at Lake Forest College. He has some insider information and screenshots even that we haven't had access to. So we're in good hands. I'm going to I'm Becky Bolito, by the way, and I'm the post-secondary counselor at Vernon Hills High School.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bianca Novacek, and I'm the college and career counselor at Carmel Catholic High School.
And good evening from Libertyville High School. I'm Erin Murphy, post-secondary counselor. We did have one question already in the Q&A, which is a good reminder that we will be monitoring the Q&A tonight. So if you have questions, please put the questions in that Q&A area. We will not be using the chat. And we should have some time towards the end to take those questions. And this is being recorded, so you can look for all of us to share that recording within the next few days, at the latest a week from now. So I think having said that, Jerry, you're up.
Wonderful. Thanks for inviting me, you guys. I enjoy doing this. A little more kind of introduction. I have been in the profession of financial aid and admissions in college for over 40 years. And I still love what I do. And I love sharing, the wacky and wonderful world of college costs and scholarships and paying for college, with you. I've got a lot of information that I'll share with you tonight. And as Becky alluded to, you will be one of the first audiences to see some of the screenshots of the new FAFSA form. We'll go into a whole lot more detail about that. But some of them, even in the financial aid office, a lot of my colleagues haven't even seen it. So it's exciting. It doesn't take much to excite us in a financial aid office, but getting these screenshots ahead of time, woo. But anyway, what I'll talk about, and Becky, Bianca, Erin, stop me if something technology isn't working, but what I want to make sure that we cover tonight is really when we talk about college and college costs, what families are actually paying out of pocket these days. And when we talk about financial, when we lapse into our language and our acronyms, kind of what we're talking about, the application for not only scholarships, but grants and student loans and work study and receiving financial aid offers from colleges, how to compare them, how to interpret them. Keeping in mind that deadlines are becoming more and more important throughout this process. So we're kind of moving away from priority deadlines to more drop dead dates, which we'll talk about. And there's a lot of help out there. Not only at your high schools, you've got three of the best resources, and I don't say it just because they're on this webinar with me, but really they are wonderful resources for the families, and they've got me as a resource. So if you pose a question to them and they don't have an answer, I love answering questions. Even if family's not even remotely interested in Lake Forest College, doesn't matter. I love answering questions. I love problem solving. So that said, the big conversation that I still have and that we see in the media, even these days is college affordable? And quite honestly, it's more affordable than it has ever been before. It doesn't make for a good media story. And certainly the headlines over the years, over the decades have been college education is pricing itself out of affordability for many families, or can it go on forever like this? And who's going to be able to afford it? That said, when we look at what families are actually paying out of pocket, 85% of all currently enrolled first-year students are receiving some type of financial aid to help with college costs. 95% at private colleges and even 100% at many private colleges, 80% at public institutions. And that's community colleges, that's flagship, universities. And of all the financial aid, of all the financial assistance that's offered to families, 2/3 of it is in the form of what we call free money, a grant or a scholarship. It's not a loan that needs to be paid back. It's not work study where the student needs to earn it while they're in school. It's just a gift to the family to say, here, this will help you with our sticker price. I will tell every family I talk to in every program that I do, even if you're on the fence of thinking about, well, should I go through this entire process, or maybe I have enough saved up to pay for college, do this. I mean, it does not hurt you one bit to go through the process of kind of turning over every stone and using us in the financial aid office to be your advocate throughout this process. To give you a sense of sticker price these days, and I talk about it that way specifically because on average, at a 4-year public university, tuition fees, room and board, not room and board, sorry. The Department of Education has told colleges we cannot refer to it as room and board anymore. We have to refer to it as housing and meals, or housing and food. And so the Department of Ed is actually going on colleges' websites and making sure that we don't say room and board. But that said, tuition, fees, housing, food at a public university, about $28,000. University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, over $40,000 this year. At private colleges, on average, about $58,000 all in cost, the sticker price. But there are over 1,000 colleges whose sticker price exceeds $60,000 a year. There are about 500 colleges whose sticker price exceeds $80,000 a year. But that's just kind of that sticker shock. 85% of families, 95% of families are not paying, $90,000, $80,000 or $28,000. And I think a good way to look at this, and kind of the conversations I have with a lot of families, is that it really is kind of like healthcare, maybe, or having a surgery. I had shoulder surgery a couple of months ago, and I didn't not have the surgery because the sticker price was like, I ended up being like $50,000, but rather I think I ended up paying like $1,800 out of pocket. And that's kind of the mentality, the way to look at college education. We have health insurance, we have financial aid to help you with that sticker price. I love this website, and I will always share this website with everybody I talk to, collegecost.ed.gov. Every one of these pictures is a link to another website. There's a couple on here that I use all the time. The first one is the College Navigator. It gives you a really nice upfront sense of what a college is all about, where they're located, what type of college they are. And I've got a couple screenshots I'll share with you in just a few seconds as well. All different kinds of categories of what a college offers. The other kind of the bookend to this is the college scorecard, where you get a sense of how well colleges are performing, how well they're holding up to their marketing, materials, what their graduation rates are, and their earnings potential, and placement rates. Here's just a screenshot. Of course, I use Lake Forest College, of College Navigator. I go into this website all the time when I'm talking to a family and they ask me questions, or if I'm just curious myself, of another college, kind of where they're located, what type of school they are. Every one of those categories on the bottom, you can drill down into much, much, much more detailed information, from just general information to financial aid, to what their enrollments are like, what kind of varsity sports teams they have, what kind of public safety reports they provide. The scorecard, again, piggybacks on that, so you get a good sense of what a college has to offer. The scorecard tells you how well they are offering it. Not only a lot of overlap between the data with costs and average amount of financial aid, average amount of student loans borrowed, but also kind of employment earnings and graduation rates and placement rates into graduate school and medical school and law school. A couple screenshots, or one screenshot to show you of the scorecard, are all of the different categories that you can go into to get more information about different schools. You'll then end up with this, and I just use U of I, as an example here. This is kind of what you'll see with kind of the snapshot of the college. They have an 86% graduation rate, which, and if you click on those little eyes, in the circle there, you'll see what the definition of graduation rate is. And nowadays, the graduation rate is based on a 6-year graduation rate. It used to be 5. It was just changed to a 6-year graduation rate. And the reason for that, just kind of as an aside, and I'll do this every once in a while, is because of the pandemic, students were delaying their education, taking gap years and or taking fewer classes online because it just was easier to do that. So now you'll see a 6-year graduation rate. I do predict, in a few years, we'll go back to seeing kind of a 5-year graduation rate. You'll see their average annual cost, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. It's not the sticker price, it's the after financial aid. And it's not just financial aid, it's only grants and scholarships. So the $40,000 that U of I charges really for many families on average only costs $15,000 after the grants and the scholarships they offer. And then the median earnings, if you click on that little eye in the circle, it'll tell you that of students who get a job within a couple of years after undergrad, how much they earn on average. At U of I, it's a nice, $77,000. If this were a Lake Forest College example, I'm just saying that would be a little over $80,000, but every college website and the College Navigator, when you go to that, will point you to something called, it's literally called a net price calculator, but I call it a net cost calculator because that's what it tells you. It tells you what your cost might be at that particular college after you answer some of the questions about where your student is coming from academically, where the family is coming from financially. It uses the formulas out there and the rules and regulations to give you a ballpark idea of what you might receive. If this were U of I or if this were Lake Forest, it would say, well, you might receive $30,000 or $40,000 or $35,000 in grants and scholarships. It also goes into detail about other financial aid options like student loans and work study. It comes in many shapes and sizes, lots of bells and whistles, very pretty on some websites, very bare bones on other websites, but ultimately it does the same thing. But the two caveats I have about net cost calculators at this time is, one, the federal formula for the federal grants and even the state grant are still being tweaked a little bit. So using a net price calculator now may not give you the exact answer or even an accurate answer. I would say if you're going to look at these net cost, net price calculators, give colleges another month or so. So by mid-October, mid to late October at the very latest, we'll know the exact formula of what the government's going to use to apply for or use for federal Pell Grant eligibility. State's going to use it for MAP grant eligibility. I'll go into a little bit more. So it will be delayed this year. It's not a promise. It's not a guarantee. It's not the application, but it's a really good, colleges love it as a recruitment tool because it gives you a sense of how generous some of the colleges are out there. When we talk about financial aid, when you have a conversation with admissions or a financial aid office, it's anything and everything that has a dollar amount attached to it that helps you with that sticker price, whether it's a scholarship or a grant or a student loan option or a work study option. When you receive when you receive financial aid offers, it's going to be a combination of all of these things, and then you get to pick and choose what you want. Comes from a variety of sources. The federal government funds all of the federal grant programs, the federal student loan, federal work study programs. Similarly, at every state across the country, there's an agency that administers its own state grants and scholarships. Here in Illinois, there's an agency called the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. If a student who graduates from an Illinois high school and attends an Illinois college or university, they will be considered for a grant from the state of Illinois called the MAP grant. And again, and I'm sorry about all the acronyms, and there's a lot of them out there, but the MAP grant stands for the Monetary Award Program grant. That has a value of $8,400 a year. That increased by $1,200 over last year, and we see that's going to increase a little bit more, over the next It's going to increase for sure, for next year. Colleges, let me go back to Illinois. They also, beside the MAP grant, also have scholarships for students going into the teaching professions. And as early as their first year in college, if there's some sense that they might want to go into teaching, they can apply for one of these scholarships, and they range from $2,500 to $5,000 a year. Colleges and universities are a huge source, of all the grants, all the scholarships, all the financial aid out there. It's not surprising that when all is said and done, about 75% of the funding that you receive is coming from the college or university itself. The rest could be a combination of private sources, of outside scholarships, or employers. Over the last 5 years, more than ever before, more employers, as part of their their cafeteria benefits, their HR, are offering small grants, small scholarships to dependents of its employees. If it's not something that you know about, it absolutely is worth asking, because I see more and more employers every year offering something like this. The very first thing that any student is considered for is a scholarship. It's the free money. And it can be merit-based, or talent-based, which I'll talk about, and it comes from the college as well as some of the outside foundations. I am passionate about students applying for scholarships from outside providers, because really, truly, it's a win-win situation. When all is said and done, anything that the student brings into the mix only helps them with their total financial aid. It reduces your out of pocket, maybe their reliance on student loans or the work study program. It's very, very rare that a student who brings in an outside scholarship gets something reduced from the college itself, unless the outside scholarship, and I've seen this, unless the outside scholarship is $20,000 a year and the student is already receiving 90% from the college itself, then maybe there'll be some kind of reduction in something, but that's rare. And it's a good question to ask colleges through the search process, through the campus visit process. Ask someone that if your student brings in money from the outside, how will that impact what they get? Merit-based financial aid from the college itself has nothing to do with where the family is coming from financially, and everything to do with what the student brings to the table, what their test scores look like if the college requires that, what their recommendations look like, how they interviewed, what their transcript looked like. At the time of admission, colleges do two things. They determine whether a student is admissible, and they determine if a student qualifies for any of their merit-based scholarships. And it's not just academic-based. Again, more and more over the last 10 years, there are more talent-based scholarships. So colleges are looking at a student's involvement in social justice activities or green initiatives, or how well they write, or if they were a leader, in high school, and will recognize that talent in addition to any kind of academic merit that they have on their application. So again, another good question. If you start to receive these responses back, and there's a scholarship that you're interested in, but it wasn't included, ask the college. Maybe there's a separate application for that. All right, let me go back up. Maybe there's a separate application for that, or maybe they just overlooked it in the application for admission. In addition to merit-based, there's another category that we call need-based, and that piggybacks on any merit-based scholarship with additional grants, additional student loans, work study. It's calculated. We determine eligibility from a universal application called the FAFSA. I'll go into quite a lot of detail about that. It can be the federal, the state, all those sources that I talked about earlier. And it really, truly is a combination of all of these things: grants, student loans, work study. And sometimes some colleges will initially offer a merit-based scholarship of, let's say, $20,000. But then you go through the financial aid, the need-based process, and you need a little bit more to make that college affordable, they will increase that scholarship. Many other colleges will give you the $20,000 scholarship and a $10,000 grant on top of that. But grants and scholarships really are interchangeable. They're all free money. They're all gift aid to the family. To be considered for any of the merit-based scholarships out there, really, it's just the process of admission. We have enough information at that time, or colleges will reach out to the student for more information about something that maybe they write in their application that they a little blurb about being involved in the music program. Well, tell us a little bit more about that, because we have a music, scholarship that we want to consider you for. If at the time of admission and the time that you get the merit-based scholarship announcement, if that's good enough, if that makes that college affordable for you, you don't need to do anything else. But I would strongly encourage and recommend every family go through the need-based process. There is an application, a universal application called the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That collects some real basic demographic and financial information from the family to calculate an index number. It's an index number that tells the college whether the student qualifies for any kind of federal grants or the state of Illinois MAP grant or the teacher scholarships or money from the college itself. A real quick overview of the FAFSA. It has been overhauled dramatically, this year. So for the 24-25, school year, it's very, very different than it has been over the last 30 years, 35 years. Very few changes until this year. Because of that, and they're tweaking it and they're just testing it to make sure that it's user friendly and it's not going to break in the middle of the application cycle. It's not going to be available until December sometime. Typically, it's available, it opens on October 1st, but this year, by law, it needs to be available by December 31st. But my contacts, tell me that it's probably going to be mid-December when the FAFSA comes out. You apply for it, you fill it out only at one place. It's a website-based application, and it's at studentaid.gov. There's 2 sections to the FAFSA. It asks about student information and parent information. Initially, it's going to, well, not initially, but it will refer to your income, your family income. And initially, it will look at the 22 tax return on file with the IRS. And the reason I say initially is because colleges can override that and say, if that was a good year for you, then in 23 there was a loss of income, we will use the 23 income. Or if you project 24 is going to be even less, we will use the 24. So whichever is the lowest income, that's what the college will use, for all the eligibility. It's in case some financial aid offices lapse into their lingo and their language, and they say, yeah, it's prior year. And just so you know, it's called prior year on our end because it's based on the 22 income initially, even though the student starts in 24, in the fall of 24. The income is brought into the FAFSA automatically through a tool called the Direct Data Exchange. It used to be called the Data Retrieval Tool, but now it's called the Direct Data Exchange. And there's been a change in that I'll talk about in just a little bit. Okay, so yeah, I probably have a lot of pet peeves, but one of my curious pet peeves is they're calling it the Direct Data Exchange, DDX, even though exchange starts with an E. You would think the acronym would be DDE. I asked that at a conference I just went to, Federal Financial Aid Conference, and the answer was DDX. Just rolls off the tongue a lot better. It just sounds more powerful than DDE. Go figure. General outline of the FAFSA itself. Again, the parent section will ask a little bit about, how many people are living at home. It will ask how many students you will have in college during the upcoming school year, the age of the parents, because the older the parent, the more income is protected for retirement. It'll ask about income, but you don't have a chance to fill in those answers. It comes directly into the FAFSA from the IRS database. It will ask you a little bit about assets, but I want to hold on to that for just a little bit because when all is said and done, really assets do not have a huge impact on the eligibility, on that index number that's calculated. Unless assets are huge, unless net worth is over $250,000 or so, it really gets diluted so much in the formula that very, very little of it is used as a resource in calculating that index number. Students, very similar, it'll ask about identifying information and demographic information. Same thing, if the student had income in 22, it will bring that in directly from the IRS website. If the student has assets under their own name that they have access to without anybody else's permission, that's a student asset, and that's included in this section. And then the student lists their college plans. So you're filling out one FAFSA for multiple colleges. You can list up to 20 colleges on the FAFSA form. All up to 20 colleges will receive the exact same information simultaneously. If you don't have 20 colleges that your child is looking into, that's fine. You list one or two. If there are more than 20, until this fall, that amount was limited to 10 colleges. We have lobbied hard because it's a cloud-based application. So you would think that it could just be an unlimited number, but we lobbied hard from the financial aid, lobbying profession. And so it got them to increase it to 20 colleges. I don't know, how many students will apply to more than 20 colleges, but at least the first 20 can be listed on the FAFSA. If there are more than 20, it's easy as pie to list the additional, the 21st and the 22nd, college on the FAFSA later on after the first get initially processed. Some of the frequently asked questions that we get, and they have changed slightly. First is the definition of parents. It used to be that the parent of record on the FAFSA was the parent that the student lived with or lived with the most over the last 12 months. Now, the definition of parent is which parent or parents provide the student the most support or have provided the most support over the last 12 months. Particularly, it doesn't matter so much if parents are married. Both parents are parents of record on the FAFSA. But in the case of divorced or separated parents, that's where that definition, where which of the parents gave the student more than 50% of their support. It's a judgment call. It's your call to say, well, the student lives with me. The other parent claims the student has a tax exemption, but I give the student 51%, of their support. So then your call as to who the parent of record is on the FAFSA. When we talk about the assets, the only assets that are included on the FAFSA are anything that you might have in savings or the stocks or other real estate other than your primary home. Your primary residence is excluded from consideration on the FAFSA. 529 plans, those education savings plans, only if they are opened and owned by the parents are they included on the FAFSA. If they were opened by a grandparent or a family member, they're not of asset on the FAFSA. Even though the student is listed as a beneficiary on a 529 plan, it's still whoever opened it, whoever owns it, that's their asset. So parents, if you have 529 plans, that's listed on the FAFSA, and it's the value of all the 529 plans that you have. So if you have multiple kids, you need to add all them up together and list that amount on the FAFSA for the student who's applying for financial aid. Kind of stay tuned on this bullet point where I've got farm and business, because there's still a lot of back and forth on defining a farm, defining a business. It was the previous definition for a business, for example, was you did not need to include it if you employed fewer than 100 employees. Now, if you have a business, calling it kind of brick and mortar business, then you may need to include it depending on what kind of business it is. We don't have the exact definition of that yet, even. Honestly, because we're lobbying hard to make it much easier for families to go back to that previous definition. For farm, same thing, not that I think that affects very many of us, but the language that the Department of Ed is using currently is, if you materially participate in the farm, then that is your asset, and you need to list the value of your livestock, your crops, your equipment, but not if you live on the farm. Then you don't have to list the primary residence. So much gray area, so nebulous right now that just kind of stay tuned for that. We should know something about that, hopefully well before December, before the FAFSA comes out. Assets that are not included, that are totally ignored on the FAFSA, are home equity. So your primary residence, You do not need to list that. The value of retirement accounts, you do not list the value of that, any life insurance policies or annuities. But then I go back to, unless, of the assets that are included, unless the value of 529 plans or the equity on other real estate, unless that exceeds $250,000 or more, it really does not impact the bottom line much at all. You're also filling out one FAFSA per student. There is an enhanced feature now on the new FAFSA. We anticipate that once you fill out one FAFSA per student, because it is the student's financial aid, it's the student's information on there, you'll put your parent information, but then that, if you're filling out a second FAFSA, that will automatically transfer to the second FAFSA that you complete. So you're not starting from scratch with that. You're really kind of only starting from scratch from the student information. So again, here are some screenshots. Some of these I'm going to go through kind of quickly, but you are seeing these before a lot of other families out there. I'll tell you what, before a lot of other financial aid professionals too. Studentaid.gov. This is the landing page for the new FAFSA. Students will go here and click on one of those little blue boxes, start a new form, or you can start a FAFSA, save it, and go back to it later. If you don't want to do it all in one sitting, you can edit the existing form that's out there. Student will log in. Students need to create a username and password that's called the Federal Student Aid ID. It's the Federal Student Aid ID that allows them to log into the FAFSA. Students need one, and parents, you need one as well to enter your information as well. Students will create that username and password ahead of time, and that's something they could do now, even before the FAFSA comes out, something you guys can do now before the FAFSA comes out. They'll go to this landing page that says, I am starting the FAFSA as a student. Now, here's another big change. It used to be that, student and parent could fill this out together, but they cannot anymore. Student needs to start it and finish their section before the parent can log in and put in the parent information that's needed. So student logs in. There's some, 4 little screens, that little video, first little video that says why a FAFSA form, why are you filling this out? Why is it a requirement in Illinois at public high schools to complete a FAFSA? Why do colleges require it or strongly encourage you to fill it out? It's because it's the only way for a student to be considered for any of the federal or state, or for many colleges, anything from the colleges themselves that fall under that umbrella of need-based financial aid. It talks a little bit about, who is putting their information on the FAFSA. It still refers to parents and students, but now it refers to you as a contributor to the FAFSA. I don't know who decides, these names and this language, but parents, you are a contributor to your students' FAFSA. Kind of what to expect, how long will it take? If you can see that little line there, how long will it take? 1 hour? It's not going to take you an hour, I promise you. It's so streamlined and so intuitive that from start to finish, if the student does their part and then the parent does their part, it may take you a half an hour or so. It may be 45 minutes at tops. And then what happens after you submit the FAFSA form, after it's completed? It takes a few days for it to be processed by the federal government before the results are released to the colleges that we draw them down. Students will get a confirmation page saying the FAFSA has been completed. Never, ever, ever in the history of the FAFSA have I seen data lost after the student gets their confirmation page. It's a very secure site. There's never been a data breach, knock wood. There's never been a data breach, never been a loss of data or identity theft or anything like that. So once the student finishes this and get their confirmation, you can be rest assured that the college will receive the results of this. And then many of the colleges will communicate with the family and the student saying, hey, we just got your FAFSA results. Here's your next step, or give us some time to figure out your eligibility. And lots of communication will come from the college after that point. Here's a screenshot of the student identity information. This is all pre-populated from the student when they created their username and password, because that's where a lot of the identifying information comes in: the name, the address, the social security number, the date of birth. When they get to this section, they will be able to change any of this. If they look at their email address, say, oh no, I meant to put this one, or I misspelled, Gmail, which I do all the time. I'm way too fast, and my fingers are way too fat for typing. But their cell phone number, they can change it at this point. Student then needs to provide consent. Now, this is new this year, where student, and I'll talk to the parents about this as well. The only way to get any income into the FAFSA is upfront, and the student and the parent providing consent, saying, yes, I agree, just bring that information directly into the FAFSA. If a student does not consent to this, or a parent does not consent, the FAFSA will not be processed. It will just stop. Student will never be considered for any kind of federal or state, or from any of the colleges, any of the college financial aid as well. So this new consent feature is very, very important. So the student says, yes, I approve, I consent to bring my information, if there is any, into the FAFSA form. The student then needs to tell the FAFSA, needs to tell the Department of Ed, federal student aid programs, what other information is going to be provided on the FAFSA. So basically it says, tell us a little bit about your parents. If a student is considered dependent, and to be dependent, they're under 24 years of age, or they're just an undergrad, they're not a graduate student, they're not married, they don't have their own kids, they're considered dependent. And so parent information is required, either the biological or the adopted parent on here. So here is where, even though the student needs to fill in their section separately, here's where you hover, behind them, because they will answer the questions about the parents to invite you to fill out the FAFSA form. It's going to ask for the parent's social security number and the email address, something that the student may not necessarily have. So this is where they would enter that. I'll show you in just a little bit. You will get an invitation to contribute to the FAFSA form as a contributor. Student plugs your information in here, and then they're routed to the section about colleges. The only way for a college to receive the FAFSA results is if a student lists it on the FAFSA as a recipient. Every college has a unique 6-digit code, which is called the Federal School ID, but it's referred to as the FAFSA code. It's a 6-digit code that they would list on the FAFSA, saying, I want this information sent to that particular school. It's particularly important for some of the larger systems, like Wisconsin, for example. Madison has a different FAFSA code than Milwaukee, than Whitewater, than La Crosse. Lake Forest College, our FAFSA code is 001706 as an example. Or if you wanted to jot that down, I'm just saying 001706. If you were to put that one on the FAFSA, that would be the only way that we would be notified that the student has listed us, and that we would need to draw down that information electronically. The student can search for the FAFSA code, the different FAFSA codes, in a lot of different ways. One of the very first things the college will tell them on their financial aid website is what their FAFSA code is. Or the student can search when they're in the FAFSA itself, putting in the name of the school, partial name, kind of where it might be located, partial location. It will then bring up, okay, did you mean Rice University in Burlington, California? Or did you mean Rice University down in Texas? The student gets to select these colleges then, and these are the colleges that will receive all the results of the FAFSA pretty much simultaneously. Student signs it electronically. Their username and password, that federal student aid ID that they created, that's their electronic signature. We don't see it on this, and I'm sorry, but there's just a tiny little box at the bottom that the student checks, says, yes, I agree to sign this electronically. It's submitted, and the student section is complete. Important to note here, the student will get a confirmation that the student section is complete, but literally says you're almost there, but you're not quite there. We need parent information. So then parents, you receive an email. It may or may not look like this, but there's just an example of the email that you'll get saying, hey, your student filled out a FAFSA. You were invited to be a contributor. There'll be a link on this page that will take you directly into the FAFSA, or you can go to the studentaid.gov. If you were to do that, you would then log in as the parent. You'll also need to have created your own federal student aid ID, your username and password, before you can log in. If parents are married, only one parent needs to enter their federal student aid ID. They kind of think of it as they're the data entry operator for both parents, but it's only one parent who needs to log in. If parents are divorced or separated, then it's that parent of record who logs into the FAFSA. You'll log in, you'll kind of see this, take to this My Activity page. It basically says, hey, you were invited to be a contributor to your student's FAFSA form. Here's where you will provide consent, saying, yes, I know some income questions are going to be asked for on the FAFSA. Absolutely bring them into the FAFSA automatically from the IRS website. Again, if you do not provide consent, the FAFSA just stops. It does not get processed. Student never gets considered for eligibility for any federal, state, or from any colleges, their financial aid. It'll ask a little bit about your demographics, even though you've put in a lot of your identifying information when you created that username and password yourself. This will just ask a few questions like your marital status, just to confirm that. College students, who will be in, who are in your household, and your legal residence. You'll list your marital status here. Here's where you would list your family size. It used to be called household size. Now it's called family size. Initially, and this is important too, initially, because the IRS is populating the FAFSA for you automatically, the FAFSA initially will base your family size on the number of tax exemptions that you have. But here you get the opportunity to say, no, that's wrong. There may have been only 3 tax exemptions, but literally there are, then going back to the residential, there are 4 people living at home instead of 3 tax exemptions. Or in the case of divorced or separated parents, it's very common for the student to live with one parent while the other parent gets the tax exemption, the tax credit for that student. So you'll have the opportunity here to say, yeah, there were 3 exemptions. Yep, there are 3 of us in the family. Or no, there's more than 3. There's 4 of us or 5 of us. And then of all your children, and only your children, not parents, of your children, how many will be in college during the upcoming school year? So during the 24-25 school year. It will then say, okay, we're just going to ask you like a couple questions about your finances because you provided consent. We're going to bring this in automatically. Did you file a tax return? If yes, then the IRS will look for it on file and populate the FAFSA for you. If no, if you didn't file a tax return, not that maybe you didn't earn enough or you're just not eligible to file a tax return for whatever reason, then you will get to the page saying, fine, there won't be any direct data exchange because there is nothing that exists on the IRS website. Except if you were to answer no to this, the IRS will still look to see if there is a tax return on file anyway, that maybe you think you didn't file a tax return, but if there is one, it will bring that into the FAFSA form for you. Just a few questions about the assets. And again, you'll notice on this screenshot, it doesn't go into, there's no like where you can click on a link to go into the definition of down at the bottom, business and investment farm. But the other thing on here, the change, annual child support received, that's a big one because it used to be if you received child support for younger kids, that was considered income. Now it's considered an asset, which is a good thing because again, assets get diluted greatly. So none, if any of it, is taken into consideration. It'll ask you about, how much you might have in, literally the line item says cash, savings, and checking accounts. Cash, I mean, you check your pockets. At Lake Forest, we get paid once a month on the first of the month. Toward the end of the month, it's amazing how many people are brown bagging it. But the purpose of this line, this question is not so much what you have in cash or checking right now, but it's what is not going to be used for everyday living expenses. It's, what do you have set aside that you can use to pay for college expenses? Same thing with the investments down at that very last one. That's where you would list the value of 529 plans or other real estate that you might have, the equity that you have on the other real estate. Parents, here's where you will sign this, and you'll just, here you can see that, if you can, that little box at the very bottom saying, yep, I agree to sign this electronically. In the middle there, words, saying this is true and complete to the best of my knowledge. Upon submitting the FAFSA form, upon signing it electronically, you will then get this final confirmation page. So different than the student's confirmation page, this one says, congratulations, the FAFSA form is completed. And then what happens next, an email will be sent to confirm that. Like, we get a lot of emails, after we submit something. And then the schools will start to communicate with the family in a whole lot more greater detail about next steps and what to expect from this point. But the FAFSA is really cut and dry. What was your income? How many people living at home? Period. End of story. You can't color outside the lines or stream of consciousness, but special circumstances absolutely matter greatly in this process. So if the 22 income was one way, but 23 is going to be less, we're going to use the 23. If you had health care expenses or private school tuition or lots of other, and I'll get to this in just a second, we will take a lot of additional information into consideration. It's not that we're being nosy or intrusive, but in the world of financial aid, there's no such thing as TMI, too much, well, maybe sometimes too much information, but really no. We want to know anything and everything that is happening in your life that is going to impact your cash flow, impact your ability to pay for college costs. Lots of different categories that colleges can take into consideration that the FAFSA does not: loss of employment, dependent care, private school tuition, a change in marital status, healthcare expenses, or kind of a catch-all, category of unusual, maybe one-time expenses like emergency home repair or funeral expenses or car repair, all sorts of different things that a college will address, saying, if you have these, let us know. We will take them into consideration before we make the final determination. There's a couple different ways that a college will collect this additional information. There are about 400 colleges that require the College Scholarship Service Financial Aid Profile form. It's a supplemental application out there that asks everything the FAFSA does and a whole lot more. Here's where you can go into detail about what else is going on in your life. If the college doesn't require the profile, it'll have its own application for financial aid, or at least standalone forms that if you have a conversation with someone in the financial aid office saying, my income is going to be less, or I paid, $20,000 in healthcare, they will direct you to their standalone form saying, great, tell us a little bit more about it. We will take that into consideration. One thing about the profile before I go to the next slide is about 400 colleges require it this year. But because the profile opens October 1st, a few more colleges are going to start to use the profile as an early estimator of financial aid eligibility months before the FAFSA comes out. Again, the profile does everything the FAFSA does plus a whole lot more, but to be eligible to finalize anything that is estimated in terms of federal or state grant eligibility, you'll still need to do the FAFSA. You don't need to do the profile. Just want to clarify. If a college doesn't require the profile, do not do it, because they're not set up to receive the results. And the profile actually does cost a little bit of money to have it sent to a college. If you're adding a college that doesn't use it or can't use it, you're just wasting your money. The other nice feature about the profile is now it is free to families whose income is under $100,000 a year. So like the free FAFSA, the profile will be free to certain families. The screenshot of the profile, I show you this because this would be the landing page if you are filling out the profile, but also on here, I like at the lower left-hand corner, there's a link here where you can check to see which schools absolutely require it or strongly encourage you to fill this out. Will be on there. This year and in previous years, we used the profile just for our international students. Now we're going to be using it this fall for any of our early decision or early action admission application students, where it gives us a chance to get an early estimate out to the family well before the FAFSA opens. The website, and you've got this, I know, on your high school's college, websites as well. It's a CSS profile at the College Board. It's a College Board product, collegeboard.org. It's a pretty comprehensive application, so it may ask you a lot of information, but there are some colleges who now qualify, Lake Forest College, for example, now qualify for a profile version called the Profile Lite. So for our early applicants, you don't need to fill out all of the profile questions. This will direct you automatically to a much easier profile form. The universal philosophy, what's happening in a financial aid office, kind of behind the scenes, is that this truly is a partnership. We are all in this together. We're doing everything that we possibly can to make our education, our institution affordable to a family. But we also look at students and parents as kind of being the primary partners, and just being able to do what you can to the extent that you can do it. We're not making judgment calls. We're not doing a cash flow analysis. We're using, formulas that we must use to get a sense of where a family is coming from appropriately and what we think they can afford without breaking the bank, basically. Lots of formulas that we have to use, but again, get on my little soapbox about special circumstances can and really do matter in this process. It's amazing how many times that needle will move to the better when you tell us there's something else going on. Never will it hurt you to fill out a special circumstance form. It will only help to move that needle for more eligibility. Throughout this process, communication is vital. It's important that you know what you need to do, when you need to do it. And so a really good question to ask schools is, how will you specifically as a parent stay in the loop? Because a lot of colleges will only communicate with the student, for FERPA reasons, for privacy issues, and hope that the student shares that information with the parent. And the primary means of communication is email, even though we know students are not checking their email nearly as much as we check our email hundreds of times a day. So ask a college, how will you as a parent stay in the loop? Many colleges, like Lake Forest, will tell you automatically that we automatically include the parent in all information that's sent out to the family. But if not, then a student might need to give a college express written consent to keep you in the loop. So a really good question to ask. And again, I mentioned this earlier in the session, but we're advocate. We're not doing anything to withhold dollars from a family. We're trying to make it as affordable as possible. So we're doing everything we can to turn over every stone out there so that when we offer a financial aid package, and it's called a financial aid award letter, financial aid offer, financial aid announcement. It's called lots of different things. It's a combination of scholarships and grants, student loans, work study, the merit-based, the need-based. It can be different from school to school. Cosmetically, it will probably look different, because of the different software systems colleges use. The makeup of the financial aid might be different depending on how many dollars the college has to offer, or as they build their freshman class, their first year class, how much they want your student. Some colleges any given year may not have as many music scholarships to offer one year as they do the next year because they graduated so many senior music majors. And so another good question to ask is, what scholarships are available? Part of that merit-based, but what does a student need to do to be considered for those? But then also, what's the makeup of the financial aid? I'm going to get to that in just a second, because there's a couple websites that are really, really good at helping you compare apples to apples with that. And then financial aid is renewable for all 4 years. Unless there's a huge influx of cash into your household, what you receive first year, you can expect to receive all 4 years. Today's Tuesday. So I think tomorrow night there's a Powerball drawing, and the Powerball as of right now for tomorrow is like $850 million. It is amazing how many jackpots have been close to $1 billion. Of course I'm going to play because I have to. If I am that one winner, or if you are that one winner of $800 or $900 million, in subsequent years, you may not get as much need-based financial aid from the college as you did the first year or pre-jackpot, winnings, but it takes something that extreme to really not expect to receive the same for all 4 years. But in terms of the Powerball, I don't think you should play. I'm just going to play, but I don't think you should. Maybe it'll increase my chances. There is a proposal for a common financial aid award letter, which would make it so much easier to compare apples to apples. It looks like this. Here's another aside, maybe a little editorial comment. At a financial aid conference, someone got up and said, because the Department of Ed said it has to be exactly like this. Someone got up and said, well, can we at least use our school colors on this? And the Department of Ed said, no, that'll just confuse families. Like, really? Colleges are going to kind of doing an end around that. And so you will see maybe this format from some colleges, maybe not this exact format, but the essence of an award letter will be the same. It will tell you what the costs are, not only the direct, what shows up on the tuition bill, but kind of indirect costs, what students pay for transportation or laundry or travel or miscellaneous meals on the weekend. It will then break out all of just the gift aid, the grants and the scholarships. The difference, literally the definition of net cost or net price is the cost minus just the gift aid. So it'll tell you what your net cost is after just the free money, but then go into detail about student loan options and work study options for the student, other options for the parents. There are federal parent loans out there. There are payment plans that colleges offer. Here's also where the colleges have a chance to kind of toot their own horn. The whole ROI, return on investment, kind of what that scorecard told you earlier. Here's colleges that using the award letter saying, it's going to cost you this much, but this is why it's worth it. This is why it's a great investment. Our graduation rate is phenomenal. Our student loan default rate is next to nothing. Our students earn $80,000, after just a couple of years, or there's 100% graduation, 100% placement rate into graduate school. So you'll see a lot of the same consumer disclosure information on the award letter as you may have if you looked at the college scorecard, earlier in the process. Here are the kind of a couple comparison tools online. I kind of like the last one, that Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, most, because it just seems easier. I've used all three, and the third one just is easier for you to input the information. What's a grant? What's a scholarship? What's a student loan? The school include a parent loan on there or a payment plan, and this really then does compare apples to apples for you. Deadlines are huge throughout this process. I mentioned this, I alluded to it earlier. We're moving away from kind of priority dates or soft dates to more drop dead dates, but know what a college is asking of you, know when you need to get stuff done, not just for the admission process, which a lot of those are drop dead dates, December 1st for early decision, or January 1st for early action. For the financial aid, getting the FAFSA done by which, because the FAFSA is delayed, a lot of colleges are moving their financial aid deadlines, into the future. The merit scholarship deadlines for applying for maybe a music scholarship or from a scholarship from an outside foundation. So kind of the rule of thumb that I will tell every family, and that, families have then, given me some feedback that works for them, is depending on when your student knows what their colleges are, look at who has the earliest deadline and get everything done by that early deadline for all the colleges, if you possibly can. So you're not just working on Lake Forest College one week and DePaul University the next week and University of Southern California the third week. Try to make a spreadsheet for yourself, get a sense of what the deadlines are, and try to get them done as soon as you possibly can. Again, lots of help, not only at Libertyville, not only at Vernon Hills, not only at Carmel. You've got me as a resource, through your counselors there. You've got a lot of great resources online through the college's websites themselves. The federal student aid programs has their own YouTube channel. I like the YouTube, the short video they have on how to create your FSA ID. It just gives you a sense of what kinds of questions they're going to be asking you. There's kind of a key takeaways. We're doing a little longer than I thought, but key takeaways. The admission application, you're applying for that now, filling out the profile October 1st if you need to, FAFSA in December, letting us know of any special circumstances, receiving award letters probably very early in the year, anywhere from January through March, although some colleges, Northwestern, doesn't send out their admit or their financial aid letters until early April. Ask us questions, come back to campus. Ultimately, we want you to enroll in the college of your choice, and not only for lots of different academic reasons, but for affordable reasons as well. May 1st is one of those drop dead dates out there. National Candidate Reply Date. Many colleges will still refer to this date because they will close their class on May 2nd. So depending on how many applications they have or how many dollars they can afford, after May 1, all bets are off. So again, another good question to ask is, yeah, and we would love students to commit well before May 1, but at that particular, is May 1 a drop dead date, or will they allow you to get an extension on it? Unfortunately, many colleges will not. I've talked a lot, and I know that we went a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm going to stop sharing, come back to us, and let's see if there are any questions that I can answer that you guys haven't answered already for me, because I know you probably have. Thank you very much. How was that? Maybe TMI from me, maybe too much information.
It's all great.
Thank you.
Yes, drink some water. I'm gonna just remind you, that's awesome. Thank you, Jerry. That's so much new info. Just going back really quick for families still on the call, I want to highlight collegecost.ed.gov. We've mentioned in the chat or the Q&A, but Bianca, Becky, and I will be sharing the recording within a week. And if Jerry's able to share his intellectual property, we will include the slides. Otherwise, you can watch again and take some screenshots. Let's see.
If some of the questions, Jerry, I think will be pretty quick answers, but I think they're probably questions a lot of people have. So we can start with some of those. One of the first questions is, do you recommend that all people fill out the FAFSA regardless of financial need or your financial circumstance? And I can answer that from like a District 128 perspective. It's now a state graduation requirement that students have to either fill out the FAFSA, fill out the waiver, which means they acknowledge that they knew that they could fill out the FAFSA and are choosing not to, or fill out the alternative application for aid. One of the things Jerry said that I think resonates the most is that some colleges require the student to fulfill the FAFSA even to receive merit aid, non-need-based aid. So for that reason, it's a recommendation, but obviously it's a family decision.
Absolutely. I agree. Yep.
Jerry, I know this is, I believe, a change that you addressed at least briefly. I'm going to read a specific one because I know there's some changes coming for parents with multiple students in college, right? So
Correct.
I have a child in college, a junior who's receiving aid, and my other child will be a freshman next year. Would I expect my older child's aid to increase when both kids are in college? And then part two is, when the other one graduates, would the younger child's aid decrease?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the change in federal grant eligibility and even the state grant is that the multiple kids in college is not taken into consideration anymore. Even though it's asked for on the FAFSA, it won't be taken into consideration when calculating that student aid index number. That said, colleges can take it into account. And in talking with my colleagues all over the place, many will take that into consideration. So the short answer might be maybe, but honestly, I really do believe that families with multiple kids in college will still see some benefit, for sure.
Thanks.
Jerry, we had a question regarding the CSS profile. So one question was, does the FAFSA have to be filled out if you're going to fill out the CSS profile? And does the order matter that you complete the FAFSA or the CSS profile?
Yeah, so if a school requires the profile, then you need to fill out the profile. And then you also need to fill out the FAFSA to get any federal or state financial aid or college financial aid. So yes, probably both are absolutely required. It doesn't matter the order, although since the FAFSA is delayed until December, I would start to fill out the profile now because you've got a couple months where you can focus on that.
Yeah, the CSS profile is still coming out on October 1st. So that's something that some colleges are actually opting back into using in order for this year to be able to get some of that information from families before the FAFSA is even available. So if a college requires it, you're going to have to do it, and it would only benefit you to do it sooner as opposed to later.
Absolutely.
We've got another one that I think is great to hit on. How do you let the financial aid office know about special circumstances? Quickly, just to let Jerry drink a little more water. You know, individual outreach is going to be essential in that case. And I think any and every opportunity that counselors and Jerry and I have to share with families, financial aid offices are there for you to help you through this. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'll go so far, and Jerry, you can, you know, support this or say what, but like I always say, pay attention to how you're kind of cared for and processed when reaching out for this help. Because that's always part of how your student will be cared for. So, but that office is there for you.
Yep.
Another quick question, financial aid package, when is it presented to students and families? Is it with the acceptance letter? We wish, but financial aid offices are going to be scrambling and deserving all the gift cards and thanks this spring as they race to get packages together for March, April. What are you saying, Jerry?
Yeah, I say, from what I hear, many colleges, we're going to scramble this year more than we ever did before, but we're going to try to get stuff done in February and March at most colleges. And some will do it on a rolling basis. Some will notify on a rolling basis. Some will have, like Northwestern, we'll just say, get it all in before then, and we'll announce in April.
Another question going off of the CSS profile again. How do I find out if the student's school requires the CSS profile?
Either go to the college's website, because they'll tell you on the financial aid page what they require, or go to the CSS profile website and click on that link in the lower left-hand corner, and that'll tell you which schools require it.
Yeah, you can Google CSS profile schools, and the first thing that pops up on Google, at least, is the list of participating institutions. So
yeah,
good one, stop, please. Another couple of questions, I may have lost count, but of course, one of the most frequent questions that I receive is how to handle situations where families have divorced parents. And so just, I think, looking for a little clarification on who, when parents are divorced, who is responsible, because that is a change with the new FAFSA. If you could start with that. And then is it just the one person who's filling it out?
So if parents are divorced or separated, then whichever parent gives the student the most support. And again, that's your call, parents. I mean, you have to decide that. No, honestly, no one's going to check. I mean, it's based on, you signing the form saying, yeah, this is true and complete to the best of my knowledge. So parents decide which parent gave the student the most support. If, in the case of like divorced parents, if the parent has remarried, then the step-parent information is required on there as well, if that parent is considered a parent of FAFSA record, basically. It's a little confusing, but.
Just to clarify, we did have a question, but when the support you're talking about is financial.
Financial, purely
yes.
financial,
Perfect.
purely financial,
yes.
Yep.
Perfect. We have a question from an international family who completed taxes 1 year. They have green cards. Is that a question they should check with ISAC or a financial aid, or is that a quick answer?
They can fill out the FAFSA, and because they filed a tax return, that'll come over from the IRS directly. So same process, for every family now.
We have a question regarding investment accounts. So we have a family asking, are investment accounts, IRAs, mutual funds, et cetera, included in assets?
Investment accounts are non-retirement accounts. Investment accounts really are just stocks, 529 plans, and other real estate. Really, that's it. Yeah.
Here's another question. So with 504 plans, wait, am I saying the right plan, the right number?
529.
Yeah, yeah. 504s are a whole different story. Another one. Okay. So with 529 plans, obviously, like you might have a lot in there the first year, and that could quickly become depleted when you're going around to filling out the FAFSA for your child's second year, let's say. Does that will that impact the aid potentially that students receive when that number goes down?
Yeah, so every year when a family completes the FAFSA, it's updating the information. So let's say you started off with $100,000 in a 529 plan, you used 25,000 of it, then on the next FAFSA, you're only going to report 75,000, which then helps increase the eligibility.
We have a question from a family who has a student that's going to be going into medical school or even like a post undergraduate program. So when you have an older child that's applying for a professional program or grad school or something greater than undergrad, and it won't be confirmed until possibly next year, how do you manage that on the FAFSA?
So if that graduate school student or that medical student, if a parent still considers them, that they're giving them support, even though they're in graduate school and they're independent for financial aid purposes, they can still be included in the family size for the undergraduate student if the family says, yeah, I mean, we're still supporting them, they might get some financial aid at the medical school and they don't even know yet whether they'll get in or what they'll get. So they can, more often than not, they would include that student in the family size.
That's one of those that the number of students in school doesn't matter anymore, correct? Or isn't given as much.
Right. So the number in college won't matter, but the family size will still
Family size.
matter.
Perfect. Okay. Jerry, I've had a couple questions this year about students wanting to protect their social security number on applications and then wanting to understand how that gets, like, maybe if that's a headache once they apply for financial aid and they're trying to connect their accounts.
Yeah, so the social security number is the primary identifier. That's what links everything up. The one thing that'll happen is any kind of information that the students or the families get, and this kind of will remind me of mentioning something else. All of the information will be encrypted. So students, parents, when you get the confirmation from the FAFSA, you'll see social security numbers as, the first 5 numbers are blanked out. You just see the last 4. Same thing with income information too. So the income information that you see on any confirmation, or you go back into the FAFSA, you don't see it, basically. Only we at the college will see the income information. But again, on all of that, because the FAFSA asks for so much identifying information, it's very secure. No, famous last words, but really, knock wood, no need to be worried about security.
And you have to.
I think that was the question, right, Erin?
Yeah, that's great.
College, so it just can be a hiccup if a student doesn't include it on their application. Then they have to go out of their way to contact each college with that information. And so most students do put that on there, and like Jerry said, it's been secure.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I think we have like 2 or 3 more. When a college calculates what you can afford to pay and they will meet 100% of need, they're asking in broad strokes, what formula are they looking at in terms of income and savings as far as what they could consider that the family can afford? I hope I read that correctly.
Yeah, and if I understand it correctly, those colleges that are meeting 100% of need are very generous. And so they will use what kind of an institutional methodology. So they'll take everything from the FAFSA, they'll take stuff from the profile. Typically, those are profile schools as well. And they will take special circumstances into consideration, but they'll stretch parent resources as much as possible, saying we might not take um, non-discretionary items into consideration. I think the best example is my mentor. Was ended up being the vice president of financial aid at University of Southern California. And when she went there after she left DePaul, one of the very first things that she noticed was everyone was giving her special circumstances, saying, "I'm very poor. I'm poor. My housekeeper is poor. My landscaper is poor. My gut, and it was a very litigious society, and I'm suing my neighbor because their tree fell on my fence." So things like that a school is not able to take into consideration, but stuff that you have no say so over, healthcare expenses or private school tuition or loss of it, that will be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway there, Jerry, and just for my own knowledge, like every school might have their own way of determining that number. But like you said, schools that are saying they meet 100% of need and those that are using CSS profile are looking for ways to help families qualify for more money. Okay, thank
Yep,
you.
absolutely. Yep.
Jerry, what is the best resource to understand what the 529 money can be used for and what it cannot be used for?
Yeah, there's a really good website called savingforcollege.com. Savingforcollege.com. That is a great website that goes into detail about 529 plans, for example, and what the different ones are and what they can be used for and how to access them. In a nutshell, what happens is whatever money a family has on a 529 plan, and it can be anything from, like in Illinois, there's the prepaid tuition plan, so it's based on University of Illinois tuition, or Bright Start, which is just like a savings plan. Can be used at any college, either of those, even the prepaid tuition plans can be used at any college whatsoever. Any 529 plans, any tuition savings plans can be used for any educational expenses, tuition, fees, books, anything that's healthcare, travel, kind of, but really mostly it's anything that shows up on a tuition bill. That is what the 529 plan can help cover.
Jerry, how about is there a net worth where you don't recommend filling out the FAFSA? And part two is, how does early decision apply to the FAFSA? Quickly, the early decision deadlines are going to be due before the FAFSA even opens this year. So you're going to find a lot of early decision schools relying on the CSS profile, which we've mentioned. And I don't know, I think all of us this year for early decision applicants, we're really, really recommending that you have a conversation with that financial aid department, do the net price calculator, all the due diligence before you sign off on that ED agreement.
Mm-hmm. I was just doing a little quick math here. Kind of, when all is said and done, and a good rule of thumb is whatever you have in savings, whatever your net worth ends up being, about 7% of that is used as a resource. So you could have $500,000 and, $500,000, $35,000 of that, the college will say, you can afford $35,000 out of that $500,000. So that's how generous it is and how diluted it is. So
that is one of the most amazing facts I've ever heard about financial aid. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's like so perfectly concise.
Yeah.
All right.
Looks like we have one last question. So what constitutes a retirement account? So if someone has assets aside for retirement, but they're not like in an official account, retirement account, such as like a 401k, IRA, etc., can we classify those assets as retirement, or are they considered investments at that point?
They are considered investments unless you talk to the college and the individual college saying, I don't have a bona fide retirement account. I don't have TIAA CREF or a 401, a 401k or, a Roth IRA. I don't have that. I have this money set aside, but I need to use that for retirement. Many colleges will say, you understand. I mean, you don't have the 401k. We will consider what you have in savings as your retirement account. This is what you probably should have saved by this age. And so we'll just ignore some of that. But that's a conversation they have to have with each individual college.
Great.
I think we've covered them all.
Yeah, I think
Jerry,
got it. Obviously, like if people have further questions or more individualized questions, there are a lot of resources out there. Obviously, your post-secondary counselors who are here tonight, Jerry has volunteered to answer questions, which is so kind. But we will, when we send out the recording, we'll perhaps include the slides if we're able to. And yeah, anything else that I'm forgetting, everyone?
we'll share this within the next few days. And just trust too that your schools are planning support options for families in January, February. So deep breath, everybody's got this and there's lots of help and we're glad you were here tonight.
Yeah. Thank you all. To whom should I send the slide deck, the PowerPoint?
Any or all.
All right. I'll send it to all three of you.
Thank
Yay.
you.
Thank
All right,
you.
everyone, enjoy your
everybody.
evening. Thanks for attending. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks,
Good luck,
John.
everyone, with the process. It's an exciting process, I promise you. So, yay.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks.